Now, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, who is Dr. Humberto Schubert. He is an associate professor in modern philosophy at the Federal University of Juiz de Fora, Brazil. He's authored books and scientific articles on metaphysics, on critical thinking, philosophy of culture and religion, theology, spirituality, and politics. He has a wide background. Dr. Humberto, thank you. Please continue.
Hi, dear Natalie. I thank you for the kind introduction. Well, I'm very honored to speak to you today, and I hope my limitations do not harm my presentation. I will try to share PowerPoint presentation now, okay? Please tell me if it's working. Is it there?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, on morality, purpose, and balance, yes?
Yeah, the actual title of my presentation is The Role of Morality and Existential Concerns in Integral Health. But I tried to be more poetic here and to emphasize that these three aspects of life are pretty much correlated and in harmony since its very conception. So the core and the essence of moral life, of existential life, that is translating purpose and meaning in life. And if we can use a very ancient word for health, balance or harmony, the relation between these three instances of life is very, very strong. And since first steps of civilization in human history, the sages and the wisest people realized that we needed to be in harmony, in full body, mind, and spirit social integration in order to actually enjoy a whole life. So there's a picture of Confucius here, who is one of the many we could take for reference as a paragon of such and sense. Well, Confucius was a perfect moral man, man with purpose, with clear vision of the meaning of life, and also known for being very careful regarding his physical health and mental health. So when we see these old sages from antiquity, the priests, the oracles, the prophets, and so on, the so-called mages from Persia, the ascetical spiritual masters in India and elsewhere, we see that they all share these features in common. They have a very complete vision of life, and they never ignore or disregard any part of life, contrary to what we do now in sort of disassembled existence in modern life, when our mental faculties and our consciousness is divided between many functions and many aspects of life we play as roles on the stage, and we admit to be divorced from each other and separated from each other, sometimes very far apart from each other. Well, the old ways to integral health always included this perfect balance and harmony between physical, mental, spiritual, and social, or one could say political lives. Now, to give a more contemporary example, we could, as another possible reference, we could also give many others. We have here the image of Carl Gustav Jung, Swiss psychologist, psychiatrist, and to some extent philosopher or a thinker, who was also very concerned with this integral harmony of human beings. And the idea, the core idea behind Jung's proposals and theories involve the notion that our being is only separated for pedagogical, for educational purposes through enlightenment. And this is exactly why Jung returns to the Renaissance, to some mystics and even alchemists from ancient times, from the Middle Age and from antiquity and so on, in order to remember society, that old sages and philosophers, thinkers, and spiritual masters, they have a more complete vision of human beings. And that vision included, for example, a notion of healing, which was not only physical, it was not material healing, but also a healing through words and through dreams and through spiritual support, a moral life that was also not divorced from the unconscious mind of volitions and desires, and therefore a moral life that was not moralist in the sense of the opposite of real morality, that is a moral life that is not judgmental, for example. And the notion of a primacy of consciousness over matter. And please do not interpret it naively as a sort of opposition or conflict between mind and matter, or spirit and matter, because this is not what the wisest thinkers from all time actually believed. I will speak a lot about this when we move to China, to Chinese thought. Well, what is then integral health? Well, integral health encompasses at least all physical, mental, social, and spiritual dimensions of human life. That means if we are in disharmony, and if we are in conflict with our neighbors, we may find very difficult to achieve this integral health, because social life, the life of our political commitments, and the part of life that includes relationships in our workplace, and even some very mundane and basic things, such as the way we treat other people, the way we address other people on the streets. That's also an important part of our life. If we are always angry, for example, if we are always in a hurry, or if we feel anxious, and if we feel discomfort in basic social situations. I'm not here considering, of course, dramatic situations, but if we are not well in social life, it will certainly harm our feelings, the way we process our place in the cosmos, and our relationships, the way people look at us and what they may think about us and how they may feel about us. And we quickly discover that even social life in that deeper sense can be essential or crucial to one's mental health, and therefore also to our physical or spiritual health. Now, that's just simple because people do not usually consider social life as important as other aspects of life, maybe. But in modern society, in contemporary society, our main challenge, obviously, is to integrate spiritual life into the other aspects of life. Well, we can conclude then that we cannot be whole and well when one of these dimensions is perverted in its essential nature. I would like to gloss the word perverted or corrupted here, because it's not only that we have a lack, or we are not focusing on something, but in order to be really ill, we have to pervert the meaning, the purpose, and the essential nature of our body, of our psyche, our mind, of our social interactions, or our spiritual life. This is very important because one may believe that this perfect integral health means the perfection of all aspects of life, but that will probably never happen. So it is very, very likely that we will never be perfectly well in one of these four aspects, or even in the four altogether. So we can be completely happy, we can be fulfilled when our body is in pain. Of course we can. We can be complete when our social life is a mess. Of course we can. It is essential, however, that the nature of social life, that is, integrating human beings in healthy relationships, in relationships that are meaningful for each one of us, that nature should not be perverted into games of manipulation, power, or any sort of abuse of other people. As the great philosopher Immanuel Kant would say, people are never means to an end, they are ends in themselves. So to pervert social life is to use other people as means and not as ends to something, to whatever your current purpose is. Now, the whole problem in our contemporary mentality regarding integral health is that we are very used to the modern image of the body as a machine, and consequently the mind as an illusion. Of course, if our metaphysical view of life says that mind is a byproduct of matter, it is also thoughtful and correct to conclude that the mind is a sort of illusion that could be discarded in our scientific explanation of life and reality. And that's what many materialist thinkers, scientists do, due to the lack of metaphysical training, to the lack of philosophical training and critical thinking. Because science is obviously a product of the mind. So it is a logical contradiction to suppose that through scientific development we could discard the mind as a byproduct of something or as an illusion, because all our scientific theories and our observations, in a very basic sense, even before we start making science, all our judgments about anything and thoughts and feelings, they are products of the mind. So they are mental approach to reality. So reality is deeply dependent on our mental states and the structure of our mind. It is therefore impossible to discard the mind in any competent account of life and the cosmos. So the great question here, as you probably know, is why that happens, why people do that. And the end, people do that because due to the lack of philosophical training, they believe that, sorry for this. Yeah, I'm exercising my social capacities here to tolerate my neighbors now. Due to the lack of philosophical training, people believe that science can say something about the metaphysical reality and can solve philosophical problems. But it's not that science is limited somehow, but it cannot solve philosophical problems, because science is essentially attached to the facts of the world, to the empirical and sensory information. And many philosophical problems are, in fact, unsolvable. They will remain for the end of the universe as human problems, as basically human interpretations of reality. While science cannot solve problems of interpretation, it can only solve problems of facts and theories that describe facts in a very rigorous way. Well, one of the consequences of this mentality of the reality as a machine, or the body as a machine, is that for a very long time, for centuries, believe that the body is somehow and to a great extent the sum of its parts. Locate and analyze each organ as a possible cog and a part in a very, very complex machine. We recognize that, at least, that the body is a very complex machine. But if we could detect precisely the function of every organ, we believed for centuries that we could change it more or less. We change cogs in a machine, and the body would not notice the difference. That's obviously a thing that's sure for to some extent, because if we amputate limbs, for example, we will have mechanical consequences that are very obvious, and some parts of the body can be substituted by artificial limbs and so on. But when we try to substitute organs, we quickly discover that it's a bit more complex than that, and the complexity of substituting parts of the human body or the animal bodies is not in the mechanical complexity or they obviously have, but it's in a deeper sense the fitting in the whole scheme of mental, spiritual, social, and physical being. I have here an example. Welcome to my garden. This is a picture from my house, and this is a branch from a fruit tree that I tried to myself, and I wanted to saw it away, and I'm not sure you can see it, but I cut it about 99% of the branch, maybe more than 99%. And for some reason, because I was lazy, probably, I left it there and went away. And 4 months later, it bared fruit in a very, very impressive way. I was very shocked to find this almost entirely cutted branch bearing fruit, and I could not know if it would be flourishing if I cutted it completely away. But I do not think so. I think that this very, very tiny and thin connection between the peel of the tree and the branch communicated enough information to make it work as it was still a part of the whole. Well, the fruits were very good. They tasted good, and I eventually had to cut it off. But it made me reflect about the non-mechanical nature of living beings. So from the mechanical perspective, the connection between branch and tree is not enough, doesn't seem to be enough to provide any communication and any support from from the perspective of nutrition and hydration and so. But the essential information transmitted made the branch produce fruit, bear fruit from somehow from its inner resources, so without help from the tree. And that may be helpful to understand parts of our life that are almost completely disconnected in modern life, in contemporary lifestyle, but that are still living somehow because of the subtle and invisible connections to the whole. Well, what is the opposite of harmony, the very opposite of integral health we are advocating here? That would be a twisted or a broke Übermensch, considering the Nietzschean concept of Superman. We can, in Frankenstein's monster figure, we can find the notion of a perfect man from the physical and mental aspects. So the Frankenstein monster is extremely clever and smart, extremely strong, invulnerable or immortal maybe. And from all physical perspectives, or even from the mental perspective of mind accuracy and so on, he was a perfect being. But if we know the story, we will notice that he was pretty miserable. And that's another interesting suggestion and clue to interpret life as intrinsically problematic, even if we are very well physically, even if medicine is so great now that we can basically fix everything that could be wrong with us physically or maybe even mentally. I doubt that a little bit, but in general, that's what physicians promise to us. Well, these are some quotes by Frankenstein monster, but I would like to stress first that his main problem is that he is not loved or not accepted by the creator, by his creator, and he's not loved or accepted by peers. And in fact, he has no fellows, friends, or even peers in a very basic sense. So the feeling of not having an equal, the feeling of being in disharmony and to be apart from his creator is a very strong metaphor for what the modern man feels, and what leads him sometimes to be in great discomfort, even in a physically full life, and a life of material wealth and health. Well, there is something at work in my soul which I do not understand. So this is a very important quote from the monster in Frankenstein, because he realizes that his problem is essentially in his soul. He hasn't physical problems, and he has no mental problems. No one he could detect. He has a problem of the soul, and he's even more explicit sentence. Accursed creator, why did you form a monster so hideous that even you turned from me in disgust? Why would a creator do this? Because maybe because of the lack of empathy and compassion, because he was incompetent to make something great, or because he was irresponsible and could not calculate and predict the consequences of what he was doing. We don't know. But the monster goes on. God, in pity, made man beautiful and alluring after his own image, but my form is filthy type of yours, more horrid even from the very resemblance. Now, the monster feels not only humiliated, maybe that's a shallow word, but it fits this context here, but he also feels not only frustrated, he feels shocked by the lack of empathy and the lack of judgment of his creator. And this conflict with the creator led him ultimately to a sort of pain, which is not a mental, social, or physical pain, but a very deep existential or spiritual pain. Well, the problem is that in spirituality, we may be very frivolous sometimes about the words we use. And from the concepts of God, sacred, or divine, which for the scholars mean more or less the same thing, to the concepts of spirituality and religiosity, which also raise a lot of problems and conflicts. The intrinsic complexity of fundamental concepts in religion studies demand from us a very large number of boundary marks and criteria. Well, religious studies is already very broad spectrum of studies, but also in theology or in philosophy of religion, the fact that we can hardly speak about our basic concepts clearly is very insightful. It helps us understanding that we have great difficulty grasping the infinite, the eternal, the perfect, the transcendent dimension of what we are talking about. but nevertheless, it is a very present part of our life. And when we are disconnected with it, we feel more or less what the monster in Frankenstein is feeling and experiencing. Now, integral health, I will claim and advocate in this presentation, is deeply connected to what we would call happiness and joy in more simple terms, in more popular terms. But here we have to discern joy and happiness in really healthy way from joy and happiness in a more social context, which is not necessarily perfect happiness and in the healthy way. So I beg you to be very careful now, not to judge me as a moralist for what I'm going to say now, because I'm trying not to be, and I do not believe I am. But in order to make a separation and to make a distinction, I will oppose this picture to the next one. Okay. The contemporary notion of joy and happiness is strongly connected to parties. And here again, I'm not recommending to avoid parties or not saying that parties are not good. On the contrary, they're very important parts of social lives. But due to some misconceptions, cultural misconceptions about what happiness really is, we developed a psychological and social attitude of breaking boundaries and rejecting traditional notions and moral notions of what we should do and what a full life means and what happiness actually means. And of course, I took a light picture, but we could add to the emphasis on drinks here and good appearance. We could add a lot more and many more questionable things, such as drugs, maybe, or sexuality and attitudes and acts that we may after being involved in parties or in other social activities. And I would like to stress that it happens a lot because of the contemporary notion from Freud and from Marx on, the contemporary notion that we can only be happy and free if we set apart, if we divorce ourselves from traditional moral values and enjoy ourselves in sometimes a more physical way. That correlation leads to many problems from addictions and vices to catastrophic relationships and things that we can ultimately regret, or that we will always regret, even a little bit before. But that are associated with pleasure and the enjoyment of life. Well, this is a consequence of some contemporary myths about morality. For example, we have a very, very strong myth correlating morality with moralism. In fact, they are pretty much opposite concepts. While morality is about pointing fingers to myself and blaming myself for what I did wrong and expecting an improvement from myself, Moralism, on the very opposite, is about pointing fingers to others. It's about being judgmental and critical and sometimes less with others and not with yourself. But while the concepts are exactly opposite, they are interpreted in society as the very same thing. And a person that is committed to moral principles is very often compared to a moralist, to a person that cannot enjoy life or cannot be free, cannot be free in a basic sense. Well, can I engage in meaningful actions ignoring morality? That's a very existential question, but the answer for it is no. To be moral is to be oriented by values and principles in your actions. So the very meaning of morality is not to obey orders, but to be oriented by your own values and by principles that you accepted and established in your own reason, from your own reason. And consequently, the only way to avoid morality is by performing meaningless acts, such as breakfast choices. Now, when you choose between eggs and bread, you may be making a meaningless choice, but you may be performing a meaningless act. But when you're involved in meaningful conversation, meaningful action, when you're taking meaningful choices, you're always considering what the consequences of these choices are for you and for others. And that's basically morality. Well, there's no personal transformation without tremendous and sustained significant change in the worldview and change of habits and attitudes. So how can you develop as a human being? How can you grow without personal transformation? But can we have personal transformation by letting go or allowing ourselves things that we shouldn't? It's usually not the way the human wisdom described moral transformation and personal transformation. It usually described it as very difficult and sometimes painful change in mentality, sentiment, including the control of our sentiments and feelings, which is something people usually consider to be impossible. Many people believe that controlling or administrating at least feelings and sentiments is impossible, and sometimes an attitude of denial. But in fact, all wisdom that humanity ever provided, philosophical or spiritual, pointed to the fact that we have to be in control of our lives. We have to be the riders and not the beasts in life. Well, the problem is it is not sufficient only to discern what is good from what is wrong, but we also have to have willpower and character strength. That is the capacity of changing course, of telling ourselves, no, I will not allow you to do that because it's not good. Now, maybe a very strong temptation now, and a part of you want to do that, but it's not going to be good in the long term. And from a rational point of view, we can make sense of our whole life and change course based on this conscious perspective. Well, the rational life is the one in which principles and duties overcome passions and arbitrary interests. The moral life is the good life. Well, that's not me saying, it's basically what everyone, at least until the 20th strange century, said about happiness and good life. The Stoics, the Epicurus, the Socrates and Plato, and especially Aristotle, and also all Western sages such as Confucius and Lao Tzu, also the Indians, the Egyptians, the Aztecs. And I recently read an article about Aztec ethics, and it seems that they consider this world, the world of mud, where everything is slippery. So you try to set a course for your life, but the world itself is slippery. It's too slippery because of the mud of the passions. Now, what's the solution? The Aztecs argued for life. The solution is to prepare yourself for the stable world in the afterlife. That's a very interesting perspective and very consistent across cultures. You can see that in Yoruba culture, in West Africa, everywhere. Well, but the moral life is hard to achieve, very hard to achieve, and it may block people from considering it a component of happiness. But it has a great advantage, and namely of being mainly dependent on our choice. Now, in contemporary society, we also have and experience a gap between spirituality and morality. External habits, rituals, social performances may not be as meaningful spiritual experiences as we expect, or by the book, what we are recommended to follow. External actions have to be vitalized by correspondent interior states, commitments, sentiments, and attitudes of the heart. Consequently, incensing your room, having an altar, meditating, reading sacred texts, bowing to pray, they may all have very little influence of one's life if such material gestures are not enriched by inner states of the soul. And here again, I would like to gloss and to stress the expression material gestures, because people would not usually relate such gestures to materialism, but they are all in fact changes in your body. They are bodily attitudes which may or may not correspond to what lies deeply in your soul. Now, Aristotle, the great philosopher that inaugurated the discussion on human flourishing and human perfection, in his Nicomachean Ethics, his main ethical book, wrote, "Every art and every inquiry, and similarly every action and choice, is thought to aim at some good. And for this reason, the good has rightly been declared to be that at which all things aim." And he's not only talking about people and humans, he is talking also about beings in general, including a tree fulfills its purpose when bearing fruit, when blooming. The human being fulfills its purpose, his or her purpose, when he or she is fulfilled in the sense of integrating physical, spiritual, social, mental aspects of his or her life. And how exactly that happens is the main object, the main subject of Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. In reference to the Temple of Delos, for example, the philosopher says that pleasant it is to win what we love. Now, he just correlated pleasure with the things that we elect to love, the things that we choose to love. And that's also very meaningful because it reminds us that the different sorts of pleasures people have, from basic gastronomical sexual pleasures to the enjoyment of music and of good conversation, the pleasure of praying, the pleasure of sharing affection with your beloved ones, all sorts of pleasures, they are strongly correlated to our understanding, our the place of such pleasures in our consciousness. And the more we love, the more we strive to something, the more pleasure we have to achieve it. Now, eudaimonia, Aristotle's word for happiness, can be identified with living well and faring well, which means that the good life is a matter of administration of one's conduct in life in order to elect and build the sort of person to be, in order to build and elect and choose and select the sort of person you want to be. Having in mind who I want to be, what kind of life I consider the best one, I have to direct all efforts to overcome the obstacles in its path. Now, happiness is mainly about the capacity of changing course in life and molding your destiny and your life to a vision of what you should be, and of the best in you. Human progress can therefore be seen as a sort of cultivation. Plato was the first to observe that some virtues seem to be gifts from the gods. We do nothing to deserve them. They just come to us, like strength, for example. Others seem to be acquired before birth by previous efforts of the soul. That's the Plato's reincarnation theory. Some, however, and these are the more important virtues for us now, depend purely on our deliberation and effort. So these are the virtues we can quickly develop through effort and do not depend much, or in which we are not relying exclusively on gifts from the gods and so on. Aristotle added that all beings develop to better states, guided by the ultimate purpose of their existences. The Supreme Being will be the perfect free agent, unconstrained, unlimited, and not moved by any passion. Now, the purpose of human life is to imitate, to emulate the Supreme Being, perfect, free, unconstrained, unlimited agent, not moved by passion. In fact, in Greek, passion, to suffer, to be forced from the outside. Now, when you surrender to desire, to temptation, you are surrendering to passion, and passion means exactly to be influenced, to be acted from outside, and not to act yourself. I would recommend here two texts, one from myself, The Rationality of Beauty, published on the journal for Science and Religion, Zygon, early this year. And basically all books from Ian McGilchrist. He's a British neuroscientist and humanist who is now the best example of the integral attitude towards mental life, including physical aspects of the brain and the volitional and conscious aspects of personality and subjectivity and consciousness. So he's really one of the main thinkers early in this century, in my opinion. Well, one of the problems with morality is that we have reductionisms that lead us to believe that moral choice is about definite and final choices between good and bad. But contrary to this to this reductionist vision, we are in life more in a spectrum from light yellow and light green to dark orange and light red. We are very rarely in heaven and hell, very rarely in perfect or in completely wicked attitudes. And contrary to the dualist vision of good and bad, hell and heaven, in a broader spectrum, we can move a little bit, and we can also stimulate ourselves to believe that we can move a little bit in the spectrum, while in a dualistic vision, we may believe that our choices are irreversible and we cannot fix our behavior. So if you're not struggling, you are not in conflict, and you're probably doing it wrong. If you believe that your moral character or your moral life, consequently your existential and life and even your health, are settled by one single choice in the past, you're probably missing some point. We are molding our character as a hard clay. It is a difficult job, but the cost of neglecting it is unacceptable. Okay? William James says, keep the faculty of effort alive in you by a little gratuitous exercise every day. That is, be systematically heroic in little unnecessary points. Do every day or two something for no other reason than its difficulty, so that when the hour of thy need draws nigh, it may find you not unnerved and untrained to stand the test. Asceticism of this sort is like the insurance which a man pays on his house and goods. The tax does him no good at the time, and possibly may never bring him a return. But if the fire does come, his having paid it will be his salvation from ruin. So with the man who has daily inured him habits of concentrated attention, energetic volition, and self-denial in unnecessary. I will really skip the part where I deal with Chinese philosophy. It's really too long for now. And we'll end with Manfred Frank now. A dinner of plates and cutlery is exactly what materialism offers about the mind. The famous studies about mind and brain and neuroimagery and neuroscience that pretend to explain the mind from little chemical reactions and reducing it to chemical reactions in the brain is similar to a dinner where you are served only the plates, empty plates, and cutlery. And the host says, well, all dinners have plates and cutlery. And what we can grasp is that part of the dinner. The food is an afterthought and a consequence, and to some extent an illusion. And you should avoid using this mystical language about consciousness or conscience or subjectivity or personality, and move into a more scientific discourse about plates and cutlery. But that would be a very, very disappointing dinner. And he claims he's one of the greatest philosophers now alive, in my opinion. And he claims that consciousness is irreducible to its passive elements. That is, it's not a happening or phenomena, but a spontaneous process. It is irreducible to quantification because it is qualitative. We have qualitative experiences and not only volume of experiences. Remember your first kiss or the first achievement in your career, and you will know that this memory is qualitatively different from other memories. It is irreducible to its products. So cultural relativism is meaningless because culture is just one of the products of the mind. Is irreducible to things that appear to it, like we cannot describe conscience from its objects or the objects that appear to it. So we have conscience dere, that is from things, and we have conscience de se, in Latin, conscience of yourself or self-conscience. Well, and is irreducible to its sub-functions, such as logic and personality, which sometimes psychologists want to which psychologists want to reduce conscience. So it is autopoietic and foundational. Well, I will end here, emphasizing that in order to... Did I stop presentation? I think yes. Well, I will again emphasize that morality, existential concerns, and spirituality cannot be separated or disintegrated from our conscious attitude towards life. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Humberto. That was very interesting to see the fresh thinking on consequences and the importance of seeing a person in context and environment. So thank you for bringing those out. I hope there'll be questions for you after Dr. Alberto's speech, and we can include that. Thank you. For those of you who haven't yet done the survey, would you like to check your email or log on to the QR code at the top of this, because we really appreciate that you fill in the survey and say how you found today's talks.